Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen. Today we're going to take on a far breton. It's kind of a cross between a custard and a cake, and it has dried prunes in it. Or traditionally would have dried prunes in it, but you could make it with any dried fruit. I've had it with dried cherries, dried apricots, all sorts of things. So as a custard, I'm going to start it with a couple cups of milk into this pot, and I'm not going to quite scald it, but I do want to get it hot. So I'm going to keep this on a fairly low heat, 3. And into this jug, I'm going to crack 5 eggs. To the 5 eggs, I'm going to add some sugar. And then we're going to whisk this until it's all nice and pale. So if you've watched this show for any amount of time, you'll know that I'm not someone who stands on tradition. I think that you need to understand tradition, and I think that you really need to understand tradition, not, one generation ago, because the tradition of one generation ago is not the tradition of 5 or 6 generations ago, or where the recipe actually came from. Recipes change quite a bit over time. I think you should know the starting point. And I think you should maybe know some of the processes by which that change happened, either political changes or environmental changes or economic changes are often the things that drive changes in recipes. People migrate, they get to somewhere new, the ingredients are different, and so they make changes. And in the end, you probably don't even need to know any of that. But if you're going to comment on that's not the way it's done, you should know why it is done that way and what the changes were along the way. Not just say, oh, this is the way my mother did it and that's the only way and it's got to be right. So for this recipe, this is where I'm going with this. I know it's a long way around to get to it. This recipe calls for rum. Now, and there are a lot of French recipes from a certain time period that call for rum. And when you get to the English translation, English translators will take the H out of rum. So in French, rum is spelled with an H. They'll take the H out, they're translating it into English. And then people will use English rum and say that's not right. And then other people start to argue, no, it should be brandy or cognac. French people bake or cook with brandy or cognac. They do. In certain parts of France, they also cook with rum with an H, rhum agricole. Both of these are rhum agricoles. Rhum agricole is made on islands that were colonized by the French in the Caribbean. And as it's a different process than English rum. The French rums are made from fresh pressed cane sugar instead of English rums, which are made from molasses, which is the tail end of the sugar production. And so this argument really hit home probably 5 years ago when I was doing a deep dive into cannelé recipe. And so French cannelé recipes call for rum, and on all of the English recipe sites, people were arguing that no, not rum. Rum is wrong. It has to be brandy or cognac. It's like, no, rum with an H, rhum agricole, because these recipes all sort of originate in port cities or places close to the coast where the rum would come in from the Caribbean. So rum is correct. But if you want to use brandy or cognac, go right ahead. I mean, in the end, you're looking for a little bit of that tang. The alcohol is going to release some of the other flavors. I don't stand on tradition, but I think it's important to know where that tradition comes from. And rum, in this case, would be correct. So, essentially what we've made here is a custard. Very simple, basic custard. Sugar, egg, milk, dairy. A little bit of vanilla, because vanilla is always good. I'm going to use the St. James Rum Agricole. A dark rum agricole would be fantastic for this. Maybe about a tablespoon, maybe just a little bit more than a tablespoon. Next in, flour and a little bit of salt. And so I'm going to whisk and a little bit of flour at a time. And that flour just adds just the barest amount of thickening. Just is going to add a little bit of body to the finished custardy goodness. I'm going to use prunes today. But like I said, dried cherries, dried apricots, dried apples. I think any dried fruit. Figs, I've had it with figs. Figs were really good. And I've just cut these in half with a pair of scissors. Okay, so distribute it in the bottom best you can. Pour in the batter without disturbing the prunes too much. There we go. Now, this oven is full. It's the right temperature, 325. So I'm going to take it to the oven inside my house and we'll bake it in there. See you in a little bit.
Hey, Glenn.
Hey, Jules.
Looks like a custard, sweet or savory?
Interesting you should ask that. This one is sweet. This one is sweet.
I was just, because I kind of looked like, I couldn't decide if these were mushrooms or, and I thought, oh, a savory custard. That would be very interesting.
Those are...
That would be very quiche-like.
Yes. Well, so those are figs.
Okay, so definitely sweet.
Let's see if I can get this out. Originally, at the dawn of... This is a Far Breton. Oh. At the dawn of the Far Breton, it was in fact savory.
Okay.
It would have been savory. It wouldn't have been sweet. And it would have been served as part of...
The first one's the worst.
Yeah.
There you go. Success.
There.
Oh.
Got it out. So, it's got figs in it. And interesting. Excellent. Looks good. I thought you were going to taste it.
I was, but I wasn't really. You looked like you had something to say. I wasn't sure.
Well, I've got lots to say. I always have lots to say. Let's give it a taste.
Figs are usually very sweet. So
yes.
I'm expecting this to be a little bit like date custard
Oh,
pie.
did I say figs? I meant prunes.
Oh, well. That's not the same.
No. So.
Definitely prunes.
I'm making a mess.
So, it's a great base. It's kind of a wah-wah, because I find prunes to be kind of a wah-wah kind of fruit.
It's good. So, a little bit about the history of Far Breton.
A little maple syrup would help.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Originally, oldest recipes, savory. Then it becomes a sweet. I've made a very simple version of what is supposed to be a very simple country recipe. Nothing to it.
My mom would love it.
You used the stuff that was available to you.
Yeah, you can put any fruit in.
Yeah. No, it could be apricots.
As I say, it's
apples,
wah-wah. I'm going to go back for a third piece.
Yes,
so, you know.
I will eat this quite handily. You look at, so that's Larousse from the 1930s.
It's got a really nice texture.
And Larousse is like the, he's the be-all and end-all of French cooking. He gives it a line. Yeah, it's something they make in Breton. That's it. You know, he doesn't really, he goes on at length about all kinds of other French cooking, and this just sort of gets a line. Yeah, it's what does he say? It's like a...
It's a regional dish.
Sorte de flan à la crème.
There you go.
Cette spécialité breton. That's it. So he doesn't say much about it.
An industrial.
Yeah, okay. And so this is very close to what I see in cookbooks from the 1800s. You look at recipes from today, and you've gotten into this sort of nuclear arms race where everyone's trying to make it better. And so you've got prunes that are soaked in rum overnight and then flambéed before being put into the batter. The batter is then left in the fridge overnight before you bake it the next day. And there's all these extra ingredients and people talking at length about how this is the traditional recipe. The traditional recipe is pretty much this, but I put vanilla in it. The traditional recipe wouldn't have vanilla in it.
Okay.
That's amazing the way it is. Now, actually, we should probably come back. Now that I've poo-pooed the nuclear arms race of other recipes, we should come back and do the one with the soaked prunes and the flambé and leaving it in the fridge overnight and see if it actually makes any difference. But I'll eat that.
I think I'd really like it with dried apricots.
Dried apricots would be great. Dried cherries, dried
Yeah.
apples. There's a version in the traditional books of with raisins instead of prunes. Depending on which one you have
What you
in your
got?
home, you use what you've got.
Again, whatever you've got.
Okay. So this wasn't an old cookbook show, but you know, we interjected a little bit of that anyway. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.
So how does it compare to the date custard pie? It is a recipe. It has a different texture, so it's got to be different somehow.
It just has a little bit of flour in it.
Is that there you go. That adds just that different texture. There you go. Yeah, I really like the texture with that
Yeah.
bit of flour.
Yeah. And I cooked it extra because all of the older recipes said to cook it longer than the ones today. So you get that really dark brown on the bottom.
The part you and I like? Yeah, that part that isn't visually appealing, but it tastes great.
Well, we polished that off.
Yeah, that's not going to be a problem.